It's about 110 degrees outside, so today on the Greg Base, we're tackling an indoor home improvement project and building this rolling mixer stand. Your back and your loved one will thank me when you're done, so let's get started. We have a KitchenAid stand mixer that we love, but to save space, we put it way back in the corner of the counter so it's out of the way when we're not using it. At almost 25 pounds though, that's quite a reach and a lift to drag it into position. Awkward at best for me, potentially dangerous for my wife and her back. We need a better way to get it out of the corner without lifting or dragging it, to keep it from moving once we get it in place so it doesn't vibrate its way off the counter, and to look attractive and fit into the decor. I'm going to start with a wooden cutting board as the basis for our stand. You can get these in a bunch of different sizes, finishes, and types of wood, and because we won't actually be cutting on it and washing it over and over again, we don't really need an expensive one either. I'll start by measuring the length and the width of the base of the mixer at its widest and longest points. Ours is 13 inches long by about 8.5 inches wide, but different models of stand mixers will of course have different size bases. I'll add about 2 to 3 inches to the length and the width of the base, which makes it about 10 by 15 inches as our target for the cutting board. I'm using this cutting board from Embark, a name you certainly know and trust. It measures 11 inches wide by 15 inches long and is about 1 inch thick exactly. It has a medium darkness finish and it does appear to be finished pretty nicely. It also has this handle already built in, which will make it even easier to wrangle the mixer and move it around. To make the board roll, we need some casters, and no, I'm not talking about these guys. We're not making a rock crawler appliance stand. I mean, if you want to, that's cool, but we're not doing that right now. So instead, I'll go with these lowrider versions from Hafela. Each one is supposed to be rated to support about 50 kilograms or 110 pounds for us Americans, so they shouldn't have any issue with the weight. This part is meant to mount in a recess and is 40 millimeters in diameter by about 16.5 millimeters tall. This caster roller extends down about 7 millimeters, and the unit also has a built-in swivel feature so it can change direction. I'm going to be using 2 of the swiveling casters at the front of the stand and then 2 non-swiveling versions of these casters at the rear. That type of configuration is pretty common on rolling toolboxes and lets you steer it like a car. One end steers as you pull it along and then the back end follows in a straight line behind it. If you wanted, you could use swivel casters on all the corners if you want to be able to move the stand sideways in all sorts of weird directions and rotate it in place. So we have the moving it around part taken care of, but we also need to stop it from moving once we get it where we want it. To make it stop, I'll be using 4 of these thumb screws with one going through each corner, and it'll have a rubber foot on the bottom of the tip that will act as a brake. When they're threaded down, the rubber foot touches the countertop and the friction keeps the stand from moving, and then if I unscrew the thumb screw, the rubber foot won't touch the counter and we can move it. I'll be using these brass inserts in each corner so the thumb screws mount solidly and operate smoothly. I'll add a recess below them to give the rubber foot room to retract. On the bottom of the cutting board, I'll start by removing these factory bumpers so we don't drill through the screws on accident. Then I'll make marks in each corner 5/8 of an inch in from each side and each end. These are the centers for our brake thumb screws. For the casters, I'll repeat the same process. I don't want the flange on the casters to cover the holes for the brakes, so this set of marks will be 1 3/8 inches from the sides and the ends. Because this is a pretty hard wood, I'm going to treat this a little like metal, and before I start drilling, I'll punch the marks with a center punch, which will help keep the bits from wandering. I'll start by drilling the holes for the casters using this 40 millimeter Forstner bit that I picked up at Rockler for about 15 bucks. I want to drill my holes 16.5 millimeters deep, so I'll wrap a bit of masking tape about 1.5 millimeters up the shaft to show me where my cutting depth should be. Anytime you're using a bit this large, you'll want to set the drill press to its lowest speed setting. And to prevent marring the cutting board on the drill press table, I'm going to throw a cloth over that. And then I'll carefully line up on my mark, clamp the workpiece in place, and drill the 4 holes to the depth of that tape line. For an inexpensive bit, this made really nice and clean holes. For the corner breaks, I have several holes to drill of varying diameters and depths. It's especially important to clamp the piece down for these holes. If the bit grabs at all, it could cause the board to jump up, and that could bind the bit, and that could easily tear out this end grain. The first one will be this 9/32 inch bit that will drill all the way through the board, and then the next one will be this 25/64 bit that I'll drill to a depth of about 7/8 of an inch. That'll be for that brass insert. And last will be this 1/2 inch bit that I'll drill to a depth of about 3/8 inch to create the recess for the feet. After completing, you can see the steps in the bottom side of the hole and also the small hole for the thumb screws in the top of the board. Now I'll go ahead and install the threaded inserts into the holes using an installation tool and a drill rather than an impact driver. This will let me take it nice and slow so I don't blow the insert out the other side of the cutting board. Now I'll go ahead and install my casters, starting with the 2 swivel casters, and I'll press them firmly into the front holes, making sure that they're snug but not so tight that they won't swivel or they bind. If they fit too tightly, you could trim off these ribs on the caster body, or if it's really tight, you may need to sand or file this recess a little bit. Then I'll press the 2 fixed casters into place on the rear part of the stand, making absolutely sure that the direction that the wheels roll is pointed perfectly in line with the cutting board. Now I'll just thread the thumb screws into the corner holes from the top until they're all the way bottomed out, and then apply a quick dab of epoxy to the end of each thumb screw and then press a rubber foot onto each one of them. I waited overnight for everything to dry, and so we're now ready to give it a test run. I'll unscrew all the thumb screws so that they're not touching the countertop, and then set the mixer in place and center it up on the stand. With the feet retracted, I can easily maneuver it into the corner and back out as needed to position it where I want to use it and put it away. The casters roll pretty easily on the counter surface, including over these grout lines that we have in our tile. When I get it to where I want it, a couple of turns on each corner and it stays in place really well. When we're done, a couple of turns in the other direction and it rolls right back into the corner. With this all in place, it really fits into the rest of the decor in our kitchen, and it doesn't take up a lot of extra counter space. It's only a couple of extra inches bigger than the mixer itself. My wife's already used it quite a bit since I made this. Here we can see that even with an ice cream bar in one hand, she can easily move the mixer into position. I attempted to make some gluten-free donuts recently, and even when Greg, the master baker, attempted to drop a mixing bowl into the bowl while it was running, the mixer didn't even budge. So those feet did a great job of holding it in place. This stand really has made all the difference for usability of this mixer. We're finding that we pull it out of the corner and use it a lot more than we did because it's just not a hassle anymore. Total build time for this project, not including waiting for that glue to dry, was about an hour. And I'd put the difficulty at something like an easy plus or maybe a medium minus, not super difficult. You do need to be very careful when you're laying out your measurements for the holes and when drilling the holes so that you don't drill too deeply or split out the wood. The total cost to get all the parts I needed was about $73, but that gave me a bunch of spares when I was done, so I can actually make one for myself and I can make one for friends and family. Total cost of the pieces I actually used to make that first unit though was only about $45. As far as tools go, a drill press is definitely a good idea for this project. If you don't have a 40mm Forstner bit, which most people probably won't, you can get them off of Amazon pretty cheap. But I also found that the inexpensive house brand from Rockler was absolutely excellent and made a clean, perfectly sized hole. Because this is a simple design and uses off-the-shelf parts, there are a whole bunch of ways that you can customize this to make it your own. You could use different hardware, or you could choose a different cutting board with a different finish to get the look you want and to fit the size of your mixer. And speaking of which, just because I made this for a mixer doesn't mean you couldn't use it for something else, like an espresso machine or a bread maker or something else you need to move around the kitchen. There's also a lot of room to just experiment if you want to. I also tried building a version of this that used these ball transfer bearings that are normally used on conveyor belts, but I turned them upside down and they worked pretty well, but they tended to pick up grit from the countertop and over time they wouldn't roll as smoothly. Or if you have a slick countertop, you may be able to get rid of the casters completely and just put felt pads on the bottom of it and drag this on your countertop. Play around with it, make improvements, see what you come up with. I hope you enjoyed this build and that you give it a try. It's a pretty fun and simple project, and it even makes a great gift. And if you do build one and you change the design or you improve it in some way, I would love to see what you make. Also, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so I can keep bringing you more projects like this. Until the next time and the next project, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Garbage truck, back again. He was here, second can. Garbage back, garbage back, garbage back, garbage back.